Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to our Bangladesh and Beyond podcast, season 1, episode 5. So, in today's podcast episode, we got our brother Dilly Hussain from Five Pillars. And today he joined us, he accepted our request, and um, we are gonna talk about some recent issues which was ongoing in Syria. So, as we know that Dilly Hussain brother has already gone to Syria, visited that place, and had a meeting with the Syrian rebel leader, HTS leader, al-Jolani. So we will talk about those, and we have some questions. So first of all, for our followers, for our audiences, some of our audiences might not know who Dilly Hussain is. So, Brother Dilly Hussain, you can introduce yourself for our followers, for our audiences.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, all the brothers and sisters that will be watching this online. May Allah bless you and preserve you all. Ameen. I'm honored to be invited onto Bangladesh and Beyond podcast, and I truly believe you guys are doing something amazing, which inshallah in months and years to come, I pray and I genuinely believe will be a huge platform, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen. Myself, I am a journalist by profession. I've been a journalist for 13 years. I was a documentary researcher for Al Jazeera. I was a documentary researcher for the Iranian channel Press TV in my earlier days. When I qualified as a journalist nearly 14 years ago, I worked as a local reporter for my local newspaper, Betrishire on Sunday, and its sister newspaper, Luton on Sunday. And in 2013, I co-founded, along with Abu Mohammed, Five Pillars News, which now is the largest English language Muslim news site in the Western world. As a part of this, I proof, I edit, I commission, I investigate, I interview, and I also host the very popular Blood Brothers podcast, which launched in 2019. It's in its 4th season. And I've hosted a diversity of guests, Muslims, non-Muslims, practicing, non-practicing, left, right. And of course, in the last 3-4 months, I have visited Afghanistan, I have visited Bangladesh after the Monsoon Revolution, and of course, I've just recently got back from Syria. So that's me and my work in short.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well. I'm tired, but I'm well, alhamdulillah.
We are very honored that you have joined us. You have accepted our request.
Jazakallah khair. It's one of the rights you have over me as a Muslim. If a Muslim invites you, you have to take up that invitation.
Jazakallah khair, bhai. Bhai, you have recently visited Syria. Syria is not a good place to go for anyone. It has some genuine issues. What safety measures did you take to go there, and how did you manage the trip?
So yes, Syria, at least for the best part of 12 years, has not been a safe place to visit. Not just because of the war and the revolution, but also because many governments don't want their citizens to be visiting Syria, because they believe the truth of it or not is debatable, but they could end up going to Syria and being radicalized. They can end up joining one of the groups, which could be ISIS or could be linked to Al-Qaeda. So Syria became, for nearly over 10 years, a war zone or a conflict zone that had extra security concerns for anyone visiting there and returning back. So of course, you're absolutely correct. Syria is not exactly the safest place to go. And even now, even after the toppling of Bashar al-Assad, we have Israel bombing the south of Damascus in Daraa, and they've also made land incursions in the Golan Heights. They've occupied Mount Hermon, and even now, it is not entirely a safe place to go. What are the preparations that I made before going out to Syria? Obviously, to inform my lawyers, my local MP, and anyone else that had to know that I'm visiting if anything were to happen. Of course, I had to inform my family. Not everyone was entirely supportive. Your Babi definitely was not entirely supportive of me going. But alhamdulillah, they understand that it is part of the work that I do. But I tried informing as many people as possible, both in the UK and in Lebanon, where I crossed over from the border. And yeah, look, there's certain privileges and protections I have as a member of press that others do not. So that allowed some level of safety when I crossed the border from Lebanon.
Now I want to ask you, Bhai, that what is the political situation in Syria now? People accept something else after the fall of Bashar. So do they get it?
The situation in Syria right now is very, very sensitive. It is at a crossroads. It is at a critical junction in the future of Syria. We have to understand that Syrians, who 70% at least are Sunni Muslims, were ruled by the Assad family for 54 years. Before Bashar al-Assad, it was his father Hafiz al-Assad, and they are from the minority Alawite community. They are not regarded as Muslims. And they were ultimately placed there by the French colonialists to rule over the Sunni majority. And for those 54 years, so many Muslims suffered. They suffered for practicing their faith freely, for giving dawah, for inviting people to Islam, for having beards, sisters for wearing hijab in universities and public places. So the situation in Syria was very, very difficult. Even if you weren't a practicing Muslim, even if you were someone who was secular, but you posed a threat to the Assad regime, that could get you kidnapped, abducted, killed, or rotting away in one of his many, many, many prisons and dungeon systems that is becoming more and more apparent. The situation now in Syria is that there has been a 13-year revolution or civil war. In that 13 years, at least 600,000 people have been killed. 12 million people have been displaced. Out of the 12 million, there are 5 million Syrian refugees outside of Syria, mainly in Turkey, but also in bordering Lebanon and Jordan. So this new Syria, which has only been, the current transitional government has only been in power for 13 days. I think it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow. They've got many challenges. Number one, to consolidate the power that they have assumed, to establish law and order in the lands that they have newly controlled. Number three, they now have returning refugees in their thousands, tens and thousands of Syrian refugees are now returning to Syria. What are they returning to? They are returning to a country which is in rubble. Everything's destroyed. You know, we've been seeing the situation in Gaza for the last 14 months, the destroyed buildings, the derelict buildings, rubble and everything. That's exactly how most of Syria is right now. So the government now has to deal with this new challenge of returning refugees. Where are they going to be hosted? Where are they going? Where are they going to be kept? There are sanctions in place against Syria, which will naturally prevent it from progressing to any kind of economic normality. And then, of course, it goes without saying, the elephant in the room is that Israel has been bombing Syria every day since the 8th of December. So these are the challenges that Syria faces. This is the political situation in Syria. And in addition to this, you have many external players and countries that want to make inroads, that want to put their interests forward. Turkey, Qatar, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, America, to name but a few countries who are very, very interested and are there right now on the ground to ensure that their interests are preserved, kept and advanced in this new Syria. That is the multitude of challenges that the new Syria faces.
So, brother, there are questions rising in the new Syria as you spoke. So, there were multiple players in the world's politics in the current situation after Syria has faced. So, there are questions rising like if the rebel leaders or the rebel groups are trying to form a khilafah or a Sharia leading government, or in other sense, if they are trying to lead the democracy, the West-backed governments. So, what do you think? What are they willing to do?
I For now, I will put any aspirations of a caliphate to bed. I do not believe that this is a priority or even something which they wish to do, at least in the short term. They definitely want Islam in their governance, but the sensitive nature and the multiracial, multi-ethnic makeup of Syria will clearly pose a challenge in that regard, because you have a sizable Christian minority, you have a sizable Alawite community, you have Druze, you have Shia, you have Kurds, most of whom are Sunni, many others are not. So Syria is very unique in that, unlike maybe Afghanistan, which is like 98% Muslim, or Bangladesh, which is 90% Muslim, or 92, 93% Muslim, it's not dealing with such a huge majority Muslim population. You're dealing with a Christian community, an Alawite community, a Druze community that have actually been in Syria before Islam came there. So there is this challenge about how is there going to be any semblance of an Islamic government with these sensitivities in mind. So for your viewers and listeners, I didn't get any indication that a khilafah or a caliphate is the model that they're looking at. Number two, I didn't even get a clear indication of feeling that an Islamic emirate is something that they're going to establish or govern by. What I did get the feeling from, and I asked Mr. Joulani, Ahmad al-Shara, this question directly. I asked him, what will be the new moral basis of Syria? And I gave him the example. I said, look, in France, you can't wear the burqa, you can't wear the niqab, because it's banned, and it's banned according to their secular morality. In the UK, you can't walk around on the streets naked, because you will get arrested for indecent exposure. That is underpinned by a sense of morality. What will be the new moral basis of Syria? He responded by saying that the new moral basis of Syria will be defined by its constitution. The new constitution is yet to be formed, but he promised that the new constitution will reflect the religion, the tradition, the culture and customs of the people of Syria. Now, if we take that as it will reflect the majority community's religion, tradition, customs and laws, then we can assume that there will be some semblance of Islam in its governance. But if it means that it will reflect every single constituency of Syria, then it may not be as Islamic as many of us hope for it to be. Of course, the BBC asked, Jeremy Bowen of BBC also asked Mr. al-Shara, that will alcohol be sold in Syria? And questions like this, which is really strange considering that so much death and destruction has taken place in Syria. And the only thing that a white
I was seeing that video, and people are commenting like people are dying there
Yeah.
because of food, and you're asking him if alcohol is legal or not, would be legal or
Of
not.
course, and sadly, this is very typical of many Western white Europeans. The first thing that they think of is alcohol and women, and what are they going to wear, what are they not going to wear. Sadly, this for some reason, this is something that is a very pressing priority for them, for their ability to get drunk and for their ability to look at women. It's just something which clearly is a priority for them. So, just to kind of wrap up on what kind of government is going to be formed, I think any aspirations for a caliphate or even an Islamic emirate needs to be put to bed. I don't see that happening. I could be shocked and surprised, but it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. However, the leadership, the officials, on camera, off camera, most certainly want Islam in its governance, because how could they not want that? Because Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is a prescribed terrorist organization under UK law, under the UN and under the US, in Idlib, where they govern under the Syrian Salvation Army, the region of Idlib, that is like a Sharia state. If you go to Idlib, it functions as an Islamic enclave. So I can't understand how they would want that in Idlib, but not want any of that anywhere else in Syria. So I think the new Syrian transitional government has huge challenges ahead. And one of those challenges will be, how are they going to govern with any semblance of Islam, considering that for so many years they've claimed to be an Islamic fighting group or an Islamic rebel group. Obviously, Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham before, around about 2014-15, was Jabhat al-Nusra, which was the official al-Qaeda in Syria. Then they broke away from al-Qaeda and they said that their intentions and operations are only for Syria. But they never moved away from their intentions to want to rule by Islam. They did that in Idlib, according to their interpretation. Are they going to implement this in the whole of Syria? We are yet to see. How are they going to manage the different demographics, the different religious demographics, the different racial demographics? We are yet to see. One idea that was discussed was that could there be a modern millet system? Now, the millet system is what the Ottomans used to implement. They implemented it in Asham. They implemented it in many parts of Europe. The millet system basically stipulates that as Ahl al-Dhimmi or as Ahl al-Kitab or as a religious minority, you can drink your alcohol, you can have your discos, you can eat your swine and khanzir, you can even arbitrate on your civil matters according to your own laws, traditions and customs. If you have marital issues, inheritance issues, civic disputes, whatever it may be, resolve it according to your laws and your customs and traditions. But if you are unhappy with that arbitration, you can refer back to the central government. That is a model that is being discussed, and that is a model that is grounded upon Quran and Sunnah, which is in an Islamic country or in an Islamic state where there are sizable religious minorities, they can be somewhat semi-autonomous and rule and govern according to their own laws and customs, but they can also refer back to the central government if they are not happy with the decision and the arbitration of their own laws. So that is something that's being discussed.
From your information, so we cannot say now that Syria will be a caliphate country or a Islamic emirate, but
it is totally unpredictable right now. We can't actually conclude.
But can we say that Islamic law will play a major role in that sense in the Syrian law or Syrian constitution?
My hunch, my feeling is that they probably will have a very overt Islamic positioning in the new constitution. My feeling is that in those areas of Syria where it is predominantly Muslim or Sunni Muslim, that there will be elements of Islamic law in those areas. Will that exist in those areas where there are many Christians or many Alawites? I don't know. But I can conclusively say, for now, that Syria will not be a caliphate. I will be shocked and surprised if in the next 6 months it announces or declares that, or if it will be an Islamic emirate. Because if you become an Islamic imara, like Afghanistan, there are no democratic elections. You have an Amir, and then you have a Majlis al-Shura and a Shura Council. Do I see that model happening? Unlikely. But it is more likely that it could be an Islamic emirate than a caliphate. Right now, no one in the Ummah knows where a caliphate will come from. No one in the Ummah knows how it will look like. No one would know how it would function. Because there are specific Sharia conditions for it to qualify as a khilafah in the first place. And I don't think that is the priority for the current transitional government. Should we be optimistic? We should always be optimistic. As Muslims, we should always be optimistic. We should always want and hope in the best situation that Allah will deliver in the Muslim lands. But we also have to be realistic in that I don't believe that to comprehensively implement Islam, rule according to Islam, is something which the transitional government will introduce very quickly.
You have met with the rebel leader turned new president of Syria, al-Jolani.
Yes.
How was your interaction with him? And I'm surprised by he was someone who wears fundamentally Islamic clothes. Now he's wearing a tie, suit, and he's like a handsome hunk, Hollywood
He was
hero.
an AQ leader.
How was this transition, as per your opinion, and how was your conversation with him?
And
The
eventually,
crazy,
many girls wants to take a picture with him also.
Yeah, Christian girls want to take picture with him.
Yes.
yeah, I mean, look, since the toppling of Bashar al-Assad, jihadis have now become very popular.
It has become
I
glorified,
have,
right, brother?
Glorified,
yeah,
glorified figures.
yeah, I have never seen with my own eyes so many foreign non-Syrian fighters being given roses by women, being given bakhlawa and mishti from people. And these are not just Muslim; these are many of them are Christian and
You
Christian women.
saw this in your
And
own eyes, right, in Syria?
I saw it non-stop in every city I went, in Damascus, in
Yeah.
Hama, in Homs, in Aleppo. I went to all these cities and I saw it
Mashallah.
everywhere.
Mashallah.
Jihadis now were like, as he said, the sexy hunks now. It's cool. It's cool. These are the guys, these are the people who liberated our country and removed Bashar al-Assad. So that was very interesting to see. And we've seen the same with Ahmad al-Shara, with al-Jolani. From a turban bearded man to then someone who wore a suit without a tie and now with a tie. So we're obviously seeing this kind of a aesthetic depiction of him as a new leader and a statesman, as opposed to a leader of a rebel faction. And in terms of my meeting with him, I knew that a meeting was possible and it was in the pipeline and being arranged. But I didn't think to myself that it would happen the way it did. So I sat with Ahmad al-Shara al-Joulani for about 1 hour. There were other journalists there. There were 7 media outlets: New York Times, Sunday Times, Wall Street Journal, Al Jazeera, TRT, 5 Pillars, and France 24. Those were the 7 media outlets that were present. We were in the presidential palace in a closed meeting. And alhamdulillah, all the other journalists asked 1 question, maximum 2. I got to ask 4 questions.
Alhamdulillah.
So I asked him about, of course, what I already mentioned, what will be the new moral basis of the Syria. I asked him that Israel is attacking Syria as we speak, why the delay in acknowledging this and why the inaction. I asked him about what will be the status of the foreign fighters in Syria. And I asked him that in your victory speech in Masjid Amawi, you said that the toppling of Bashar al-Assad is a victory for the Muslim Ummah. What do you mean by this? So let me just tell you briefly his 4 answers. I already told you that he said that the new moral basis will be shaped by the new constitution, which is yet to be formed, and that will reflect the religion, tradition, customs of the Syrian people. With regards to Israel, he said that this is not a priority for us right now. What is a priority for us right now is unifying the Syrian people, consolidating power, law and order in the lands that we have assumed power over, is to bring back the functioning aspects of the state, the ministries, because the toppling of the Assad regime basically led to key state functions not operating. So we need to activate and make sure that the ministries are functioning. We have to deal with returning refugees. We have to deal with sanctions. We have to deal with all these issues. So right now, fighting Israel is not one of those issues. But we appeal to the international community to ensure that Israel respects international law. Now, we know over the 14 months of the genocide in Gaza that Israel doesn't give a damn about international law, and the international community doesn't care about ensuring that anyone follows international law, unless it's a Muslim country or a country that they have a problem with. When it's Israel, they can do as they wish in the region. Number 3, with regards to the status of the foreign fighters, Mr. al-Shara said that they are a part of Syria now, that many other countries give citizenship for people when they live there for 4 or 5 years, and they don't make any type of sacrifices that the muhajirin and the foreign fighters have done, who have been here for longer than 10 years, have given their blood, sweat and tears and their lives to the Syrian revolution. So therefore they should be celebrated, and it is very likely that they will be given citizenship and integrate into Syrian society. When I asked him, what did you mean that the toppling of Bashar al-Assad was a victory for the Muslim Ummah, he said to me, it is a victory for the Muslim Ummah because so many Muslims outside of Syria gave sadaqah, gave zakah, financially helped, did aid convoys, did humanitarian work. Many non-Syrians came here to fight Bashar al-Assad, to defend the Syrians from this oppressive dictator. And we know what Bilad al-Sham and Syria means to the Muslims in terms of our religion. But we do not have any plans to export this revolution to anywhere else. Those are the 4 questions I asked, and those were the responses I got in short. In terms of my firasa, my feelings, the energy and the vibe he gave me the energy and the vibe of someone, first and foremost, looked tired. He looked exhausted. He was very quietly spoken, but very succinct in his response. He gave his answers very methodically, very succinctly, but he never directly answered most of the questions, which tells me that this is a politician in the making. This is no longer a jihadi in the mountains of Idlib. This is now someone who is looking to govern and lead a state. And when you come and govern and lead a state like Syria, and he's been receiving high-level diplomats and foreign ambassadors from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, as well as other countries.
America also sent a delegation.
Yes. America's the US Embassy in America has already met with HTS officials, and that meeting resulted in the $10 million bounty on his head being removed. So the energy that he gave me was someone that is a statesman and a leader in the making or already made. Now, you're no longer dealing with a rebel leader or a militia leader. You're now dealing with someone who is now the de facto president of Syria. And that comes with it a level of tenacity and decorum, which he showed. Many brothers have asked me, brother, did he give you the Salahuddin vibe? What does that even mean? How does anyone give Salahuddin vibes? I don't know what Salahuddin vibes means. Some others said to me, do you think he's a US stooge? Do you think he's a US agent? How does one make such conclusions? So these kind of questionings is a bit, what do I say? It's a bit irrational. But I understand what people are trying to gauge. They're trying to gauge what was your firasa, what was the energy that you got from him. The energy that I got from him is a statesman and a leader in the making, ready to lead Syria. And his responses were very diplomatic, very pragmatic, and therefore he no longer sees himself as the leader of a rebel faction, but now as the de facto leader of Syria.
Then I have another question, Bhai. You already visited to Syria then, and eventually we said that it is the victory of the Muslim Ummah as well, the Joulani. But the minorities group of Syria, are they considered this as their victory as well?
A very good question, and this is where there could be some similarities with the Monsoon Revolution, which led to the toppling of Hasina, the Daghuta. And that's basically Hasina's...
Sorry to interrupt you. To answer this, can you please answer one more question, which is related to this? How do you compare Hasina with Bashar al-Assad? You have said that there are dungeons. And you might have not seen this report, the Gomtodonto Commission. You can understand Bengal, right?
Yes, brother Asif Adnan sent it to me earlier today.
Yeah, it is very horrifying. Like there were holes, and it was like 4x5 rooms, and people were there for like months and years. They were killed in rivers. Stones were tied to them so that their dead body couldn't come up.
Couldn't float in the river. In the sea.
That's very horrific. Now, how do you compare Sheikh Hasina, who is also a dictator, tyrant, to Bashar al-Assad, who is also a dictator and a tyrant?
So there's two parts of the question. Let me answer the brother's first part, which is it a victory for the minorities as well? The same question could be asked about Bangladeshi Hindus. Was the toppling of Hasina a victory for them? Do they see it as a victory? Do they see it as Shadid 2.0? We don't know. My feeling is that there is a strong constituency of Hindus in Bangladesh who are Hindutva, ideologically affiliated to ISKCON, and there are others who are very proud of Bangladesh and actually see the country as their own motherland. Now, in Syria, it's hard to say whether the Alawites, which is what Bashar al-Assad is, he's an Alawite, whether they see the toppling of the Assad regime as a victory for themselves. It's hard to conclusively say yes or no, but my feelings would be that they are naturally concerned because they no longer enjoy the privileges and the powers that they had under Bashar al-Assad. The Alawites are not the majority. They're a minority. But for the best part of 50 years, they enjoyed the privileges, the protections, as if they were the majority community favored by the ruler himself. So all the senior positions in the military, all the senior positions in the intelligence, all the senior positions in the police, all the senior positions in the civil service were pretty much Alawites. So if that's now been taken away from you, the question now is, do you see that as a victory? I will let the viewers and listeners conclude whether they would see that as a victory or not.
But Christians are also a minority there, so
yes, the Christians
don't
are
you
a
think
minority.
they see this as a victory for themselves?
Yes, I think many Christians are very happy. I think many Christians are happy. They're celebrating Christmas in Aleppo, in Hama, in Homs. At the end of the day, look, brothers, people generally just want security and safety. Whether it's a secular government that gives it, or an Islamic government gives it, whether BNP or Awami League give it, or Jatiyo or Jamaat give it. People just want safety, security, food, shelter, clothing, fair and equal access to education, and the opportunity for employment. Generally, that's what most people want. So they don't actually care. I know this is concerning, but most people don't care which ideology, which type of government fulfills these rights for them. Obviously, as a Muslim, we believe that Islam, when implemented properly, comprehensively, and justly, it delivers on all of those things fairly. But for the Christians and the minorities in Syria, as I understood, their main concerns are that their places of worship will not be destroyed, that their religious festivals will be allowed to proceed, that they will be able to celebrate their religious festivals. And we're seeing that this has been allowed. Christmas is happening in Syria as we speak. So is it a victory for the minorities? It depends which type of minorities are we talking about. Of all the minorities, I think the Alawites will be the most concerned and worried. But for the other minorities, the Druze, the Christians and so forth, Mr. Ahmed al-Shara and the HTS leadership in the last 2 weeks have been meeting representatives and leaders and tribal elders from all these communities, assuring them safety, security, and general amnesty. Second question, is there similarities between Assad and Hasina? Absolutely there is. Both of them ran their countries as if it was their father's private properties. Both of them attacked Islam, and they attacked Islamic activists and scholars. They had a specific issue with the outward manifestation of Islam. In fact, they saw Islam as a threat to their kursi, to their regime. So they're very similar in that regard. Tyrants and dictators, wherever they are, whether they're in Bangladesh or in Pakistan or in Central Asia or in the Arab world, dictators and tyrants all have dungeons. They all have prisons. In the case of Assad, there's a saying, Damascus is two cities, one city above the ground and a completely different city under the ground. There were prisons under warehouses, shops, factories, hospitals, orphanages, underground prisons that Bashar al-Assad had that dated back from his father's time. I am very sure Sisi of Egypt has the same. Gaddafi had the same. I am very sure King Abdullah of Jordan has the same, or similar prison complex systems. Hasina definitely had them. So one of the identifying points of brutal regimes like the Hasina regime and the Assad regime, as well as all the other brutal dictators and their respective regimes, is that they must have a sophisticated prison complex system. because it is via this prison complex system that you get to eliminate political opposition, you get to imprison and remove religious opposition, and anyone who poses any threat to your rule will be spending months, years, and even being killed and raped in these prisons and dungeons. So in that regard, they are absolutely similar. They were both secularists. They did not want to see any Islam in any part of their society, and they saw that as a threat. But there are also distinct differences in the revolution that we saw in Bangladesh in July and August this year, and the 13-year revolution that we saw in Syria. In Syria, there were so many different players officially taking part in the revolution and the civil war. We had Iran, we had Hezbollah, we had Russia bombing from 2016 onwards, we had Turkey, we had Saudi and Qatar funding certain rebel factions early on in the revolution. So we've seen many different external players officially taking part in the revolution and the civil war. In Bangladesh, this was not the case. Of course, we are aware that loyalists to India and raw agents were absolutely active during those critical 6 weeks that the Monsoon Revolution was. But there was no presence on the ground from external players or actors, right? And in the course of 6 to 8 weeks, alhamdulillah, with the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the students managed to unify the whole country, which led to a relatively non-violent toppling. Yes, 1,700 to 2,000 people were martyred, yes. But where is 1,700 to 2,000 and where is 650,000 that were killed in Syria? But I also believe that if Hasina had the opportunity, she would not hesitate to kill that many of them.
She tried to get that opportunity. She
Of course, she wanted
army
it.
forces.
She wanted the army to kill Bangladeshis.
Yeah.
She wanted India to intervene militarily, and that's what I was going to say. If she had the opportunity to protect her throne, she probably would have killed as many people as Bashar al-Assad. But she wasn't given that opportunity. And another thing that is very similar between Bashar al-Assad and Hasina is that the cowards that they are, they didn't want to face the music. They didn't want to face accountability or justice, so they ran away. So we have Bashar al-Assad hiding in Moscow, in Russia, and we have Hasina hiding in India. So there are those similarities and there are those differences. Oh, one more very important difference. The Monsoon Revolution, as far as I understood it, wasn't overtly Islamic. It was about the anti-quota system, which then progressively became an anti-regime movement. Yes, there were Islamic students. Yes, there were constituencies within the wider movement that were Islamically inclined. But the loudest voices of the Monsoon Revolution, at least from my reading and understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't a kind of desire to, it wasn't an Islamic revolution. It wasn't to bring Islam into Bangladesh's new government, right? There could be pockets of people who wanted that, or at least wanted more breathing space to have these discussions. But the Syrian revolution was very Islamic from the very beginning. From the very beginning, there were undeniable, unequivocal sentiments that were Islamic from the get-go.
Yes, obviously, because maximum students in this protest of Bangladesh have a severe Islamic values. Yes, of course. Yes, we also agree with this. But there is no chance. There was no chance of this type of things like we want to form an Islamic government or something else here. And I also,
but you cannot deny that we were motivated from Islamic things.
Yes, obviously, because we have severe Islamic values within us.
Yeah, almost all of us.
Almost all of us, but there was no indication that we want to form such a government like the Khilafah or Imara.
We didn't have any intention what to do after Hasina flees or Hasina falls.
Eventually, obviously, we want to say that because maximum students, it's true enough that maximum students did not even think about this. That Hasina,
what could we do?
Hasina would flee.
Of course. And look, and just to be clear, I am not taking away from the Monsoon Revolution any kind of Islamic undercurrent, But we just have to be honest with ourselves that the Monsoon Revolution was not an Islamic revolution. It was a revolution and an uprising that began from the brutal policy applied by the Hasina regime towards students that were protesting peacefully over the quota system. And within that wider movement, there were most certainly students that were inclined by Islam and Islamic values and their sense for justice and opposing tyranny and oppression. There's no denying that. But in stark contrast to Syria, it was Islamic from the get-go. In terms of like the future government that we want to see, the new constitution, the laws, etc., etc., we want it to be more Islamic. So that is obviously a key difference as well.
Bhai, sure. You have been to Afghanistan, you have been to Syria, you have been to 38 countries, if I remember, you once told me.
Yes.
You have been to Bangladesh, obviously. There is a rise of Islamic sentiments in our youths. What's your opinion on this? What impact will it bring on Bangladesh? And what problems do we have in Bangladesh? As per your opinion, you recently visited Bangladesh.
Yeah, so Bangladesh is obviously my motherland. It has its own history, it has its own dynamics, it has its own position in the region of Southeast Asia, which is very much linked to the British Empire, the post World War II partition, and so forth. But what I saw in Afghanistan was very different to what I saw in Syria. What I saw in Bangladesh and Syria is very different to what I experienced in Bangladesh. I don't want to use the word disappointment because that's not fair. My frustration is that for whatever reason, the Muslims of Bangladesh, at least those who consider themselves to be Muslims, those who consider them to be, adherents of Islam, that they are very shy, they're very reserved to present Islam as a solution for society, or to even just be proud of being a Muslim and saying that this is a Muslim majority country, so therefore the values, the ethics of our society should reflect that. I find that for whatever reason, it could be the brutality and the muscular secularism of the Hasina regime. It could be that for many, many, many years, anything to do with Islam in the public sphere is associated with being a rajakkar or being linked to Pakistan or terrorism. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is as to why the Muslims of Bangladesh seem to be very shy about their religion. If you were to compare it to, let's say, Pakistan, if you were to compare it to Afghanistan, if you were to compare it to some of the Arab countries, Bangladesh, for a country that is 90% plus Muslim, the third most populated Muslim country in the world, that they're so shy to vocalize Islam, to present it as a solution, to help it shape society and governance. I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we overcome this and that we become more courageous and more confident in articulating and presenting ideas from our religion.
If I want to add with you, you doubted some reasons, like we are shying because of this Pakistan link or terrorist something or Hasina regimes. You also one thing, that's Razakar. So in our country, if I want to say in our country, after the Revolution War of 71, some peoples, some intellectuals, Indian peoples wanted to reshape this war as a Hindu-Muslim war.
Yep.
But it was completely a war between the government or the dictator government of the Pakistan versus the general people of Bangladesh. Many peoples, many religious peoples, many Muslim peoples fought against this Pakistan regime. Eventually, my father also, who was linked with the Jamaat politics. So many Jamaat rukuns also fought against the Pakistan regime. But there is a narrative in our country that if you were a diehard Muslim or a fundamentalist Muslim, that you were linked with the Pakistan because
exactly.
we fought against
that's what I meant.
Or you were a Razakar, or you were a terrorist.
We were fought against the Islam. there is a narrative in our country. So we are not fighting against the Pakistan. We are fighting against the Islam. So if you want to live in this country, then you have to believe that you cannot be a fundamentalist Muslim. You have to respect the values of others over your values, mainly. You cannot say puja is a religious occasions. It is a Bengalis occasions. So you cannot say it is all over countries' vacations.
Sir, I want to add some points with Rubaid. Like, mm, in the past few decades, they tried to portray fundamentalist Islam as something very terroristic, something which is unhuman. You can't preach or you can't practice those kind of Islam just because majority of the people don't practice. So that is why you can get attacked by them very easily. And another thing, the Indian hegemony, as we know, this is a open secret, or this is obviously not an open secret. This is everyone knows that Indian hegemony tried to control Hasina regime, and they obviously controlled our whole culture, overall culture. So therefore, um, we get to control by those Hindutvas, those pro-Hindus who were trying to suppress our Muslim cultures. The things which we call moderate in terms of Islamic sense, they call these things fundamentalists or jungi or terrorists. So these were their narrative. These were their thinking about the Islamists, about the Muslim practicing people. So what do you think? How can we overcome this, and how can we make Bangladesh a greater Islamic state or a place for our future?
That's a big question, and many things that you mentioned. Let me just address some of the points that you mentioned. With regards to Indian hegemony, the way in which the Hasina regime projected and presented political Islam, all these terms we have to reject. We have to reject the term of fundamentalist. We have to reject the term Islamist. We have to reject these terms. Because ultimately, if you are a Muslim and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you believe that the Quran is the truth and the speech of Allah, that it is the perfect blueprint for life, both public and private. If you believe in the Day of Judgment and you believe in these things, you wholeheartedly believe in these things, then naturally you would want Islam to play a more public role in governing society, at least shaping and influencing society. So we need to normalize that there is not this compartmentalization of different Muslims. Secular Muslim, liberal Muslim, national Muslim, fundamentalist Muslim. We need to stop this. We need to stop these labels that have been imposed on us by our oppressors and occupiers. Why do we adopt the language and the labels of those who want to keep us divided? Either you are a Muslim who believes in Islam in its comprehensive form, or you don't. Now, if you are someone who believes that Islam is a private matter, how we pray, how we do wudu, how we do nikah, etc. and so forth, but you believe that Allah does not have a say for how we govern, how we rule, etc. and so forth, then this shows that there is a contradiction in your understanding of Islam. So therefore, it is the responsibility of the practicing Muslims to educate the wider Muslim community about the way we approach and understand our religion. If we approach and understand our religion from the perspective of secularism, which is that Islam is just a set of rituals and do's and don'ts, and it has no say in the public, we need to educate and engage with our brothers and sisters in wider society to explain to them that this is an incorrect understanding of Islam. Because I will also say this, brothers, if anyone tries to implement Islam and the people don't want it, they will rebel. They will fight against it. What you want is you want the people to have a muhabba for Islam. to understand Islam, to want to see it, to want to see its justice, to want to see its positive impact on society. They need to want it first. And to want it first, you need to understand it first. And to understand it first, you need to educate the people. So step number 1, grassroots activism and dawah and community engagement with Muslims of all walks of life, explaining to them, engaging with them, having brotherly and sisterly discussions with them about what Islam has to offer for all these problems that Bangladesh is facing. Number 2, based on these meaningful interactions and engagements, we also want to speak to those who are people of influence, so they can be lobbied, so they can be debated, so they can be convinced. Then we can look at more loftier aspirations with regards to governance and a more of a top-down. I am neither top-down or bottom-up. I believe that the dawah for Islam is top and bottom and middle, meaning those on the grassroots have a duty, those higher up in the echelons of power and the corridors of power have a duty, and those in the middle have a duty. We need to educate the Muslim masses about Islam so they could want it, and that if it ever comes, they will not be the first to oppose it or fight it.
Brother, so you seem to be so much concerned about Bangladesh, about us, about the Muslims in Bangladesh. Like, we're so much apologetic, we're shy about our religion. So, as a Bengali, do you have any plan or initiative which you're considering to contribute to Bangladesh development or address its challenges? What do you think? What is our next challenges can be? Since we already gotten out our Hasina government, and we currently having or enjoying some freedom, not in all sense, but comparing to the previous regime, it is obviously a freedom. Like we are doing this podcast. If it was the Hasina regime, we could never do this. It was kind of
Absolutely.
it was kind of impossible.
We could be in Hina tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yes,
That's
of
for
course.
sure.
Of course. I understand that.
we could be in crossfire. I mean, we could get killed, and they will call it at crossfire. They would tag us Jongi, right?
Of course.
For sure.
So look, I mean, look, there is no doubt that there is most certainly a feeling in Bangladesh where things are free. You can speak more openly. You can have open discussions. Even in my last visit in October, I attended a conference which was about Akhand Bharat, Mahmudur Rahman, subhanallah, and other academics. They spoke, and it was a very fiery anti-India conference. This was unimaginable during Hasina's period. Unimaginable. So no doubt that since the toppling of Hasina, there is certainly more room and breathing space for various discussions to take place and debates. But there are 3 things which Bangladesh needs to do, and I can at least try to contribute to 1 or 2 of the 3. Number 1, the interim government and the cabinet of advisors need to ensure that there are no remnants of the Hasina regime in key positions of influence. Now, they've already made some mistakes with certain appointments. I don't know what the update has been on these appointments, but they need to ensure that Awami League loyalists are purged from the state institutions, whether that is the judiciary, whether that is the military, whether that is the police, whether that is the security services, whether that is in the educational sector and the cultural and media sector. We need to ensure that there is no remnants of the Hasina regime in these key positions of power and influence. Why? Because you can get rid of dictators. You can get rid of the head of the snake, but the body of the snake remains. And therefore, just doing cosmetic change, which is big, it is big. Removing a dictator that sits on the throne is big. But the regime, the deep state, that the dictator established over the course of decades, that needs to be ensured that that is no longer existent. Number two, there needs to be a more confident and optimistic approach by Islamically inclined Bangladeshis. Meaning, as I understood and I've seen, in Bangladesh, there are two extremes when it comes to religious Muslims. Either you are the madrasa, Molvi, mullah, who is seen as someone who is uneducated, someone who pursued religious studies because they didn't succeed in secular studies or professional career, that they became a mullah, Molvi, and a madrasa student. The other extreme is that that the religious Muslim is someone who is quiet and passive. Oh, my religion is just for myself and it's for my private affairs. There has to be a striking balance in the middle. There has to be a striking balance in the middle. There has to be an arising of a new generation of Muslims in Bangladesh who are confident, who are educated, who are articulate, who can present Islamic ideas and solutions for society and defend them and engage in respectful debate and dialogue.
Do you think it is coming?
I think it's coming. Yeah, I think it is coming. I think your podcast is an example of that. I think the very fact that many Muslims of Bangladesh, youngsters, especially students, take an interest in English-speaking Islamic activists and stuff happening outside of Bangladesh, this is a good indication. So alhamdulillah, I am optimistic that I'm seeing pockets and promising signs. Yes, but we need to gear up a bit more. We need to shift the gear because there's only so much you can stay on cruise control. We need to become, because we don't know what future government is coming in Bangladesh. We don't know how, if BNP assumes power, we don't know what that Bangladesh will look like, you know? So we need to make those relevant preparations now. And that includes engaging with all the different existing movements and groups. Jamati Islam, Hifazat Islam, Islamic Andolon, and all the different groups and movements that exist, political or apolitical. There needs to be engagement from them, and even the youth from those groups need to approach a different style for a different era. And I hope that as five pillars, myself, as someone who is of Bangladeshi origin, and I see Bangladesh as my motherland, that inshallah ta'ala that I can increase my visitations and have strategic meetings and even training sessions with regards to how we become Muslims that can engage in debate and dialogue from an Islamic perspective.
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask, but you answered it foremost. Okay, another question. When we said that we are going to interview Dilly Hussain, a brother who is a Bengali brother from England asked to me, he gave this question to ask you, that we have many migrants, they have financial knowledge and new skills, but they can't feel ties with their roots. What can they do to bridge their roots for making Bengal prosperous through a mutual relationship? To sum up that, what can Bengali who are living abroad can do make Bangladesh prosperous and Islamic?
They can do a lot, but sadly, the reality is that many Bangladeshis in the diaspora in the West, including Londonese, have had negative experiences of engaging with Bangladeshi authorities. You know, bribes, corruption, your own family members, you know, sometimes cheating you. The processes are too long. All these things have not encouraged Bangladeshis outside of Bangladesh in the West to be confidently investing and giving back. So my advice to Bangladeshis is that don't make our life hard if we want to give back. If we want to give back with professional transferable skills, if we want to make business investments, don't make our life hard with corruption, bribes, and long processes. So that is more advice to the authorities and not necessarily people on the grassroots. Now, in terms of Bangladeshis outside of Bangladesh, whether they're in the US or North America or Europe, we need to kind of get out of our privileged bubble. Things in Bangladesh are not going to operate the way things operate in Britain or America. We need to get out of this Western bubble where we are privileged and used to certain ways of things being done. That is not the case in not just in Bangladesh, in many economically developing countries. They simply don't have the systems and processes in place to get things done efficiently, adequately, and in a prompt manner. We require some level of patience because the whole point of giving back to Bangladesh or our ancestral Muslim majority motherlands is that we hope to help them become efficient and competent and timely. If we just give up because, oh, there's too much corruption, oh, the process is too long, oh, there's too much bureaucracy and red tape, you need to show some level of patience with your motherland. It can't be all or nothing exactly how we want it in the UK. So, advice to both sides. The authorities in Bangladesh need to make processes easier for entrepreneurial investments and for people to come and teach transferable professional skills. And the Bangladeshis living outside of Bangladesh in the West need to employ some level of patience and understand that the whole point of us giving back to Bangladesh is to help them become a country that can function efficiently and proficiently and competently.
That's a great podcast, great interview. We can conclude now. Do you have any message to the youths of Bangladesh?
My youth,
especially for our viewers.
my advice, my parting advice to the viewers and listeners and to the youth of Bangladesh is that, my dear brothers and sisters, we are all going to die. If there's one thing that's guaranteed in life, is that we're going to die. We don't know how we're going to die. We don't know when we're going to die, but we know we're going to die. And when we are 6 feet under in our khabar, in our grave, no one's going to ask us about ideology. No one's going to ask us about our career. No one's going to ask us about our academic qualifications. We are going to be asked three things. Who is your Lord? Who is your prophet? What is your religion? That is why we say the dua, Raditu billahi rabba, wal islami dina, wa bi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam nabiyya. We say this dua because we tell ourselves and testify that Allah is our Lord, Islam is our deen, and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is our Rasul and is our Nabi. Live according to that reality. Live according to the reality that you're not going to be asked about your country. You're not going to be asked about your bongsho. You're not going to be asked about your village or your gram or your union. You're not going to be asked about your politics. You're not going to be asked about your BA honors and your MA and your PhD. All those things are important. But what ultimately is going to, define what your akhirah is going to be is those three questions. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? And did you live according to those three things? Raditu billahi rabba, wa bil islami dina, wa bi Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam nabiyya. Why do we say this dua at night and at day? Is because we want to live according to it. So live according to it. If you think you are already living according to it, do better. If you believe that you are not living according to it, do more. There is no excuse for anyone. Bangladesh is a beautiful nation. The region of Bengal is rich with Islamic history, with the blood and the life and the sacrifices of our predecessors. And we want Bangladesh to play a much bigger role in the region, inshallah ta'ala. And victory and honor only comes from Islam. So if you want to take anything away from this entire podcast, is that not everyone needs to be an Islamic revivalist. Not everyone needs to be an Islamic activist. Not everyone needs to be, involved in Islamic politics or dawah. But at the very least, live according to those three questions that you're going to be asked in your grave. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? Because if you can live according to those three things, and society becomes aware of these three questions that are going to be asked, you will naturally see a progression and a move and a gravitation towards Islam. If the people want Islam and they love Islam and they understand Islam, they will not oppose Islam. If they don't understand Islam, they have misconceptions and stereotypes about Islam, they will oppose Islam because they don't understand it. So there is a responsibility amongst us all to be gatekeepers, shepherds, and vanguards of this religion. Because this religion, when followed properly and when implemented properly, justice prevails, and the majority community and the minority communities all flourish and thrive. That's my concluding and parting advice to viewers, listeners, and the youth of Bangladesh.
Jazakallahu khairan, bhai. Thank you for joining us. It's been an honor to have you in our podcast. Inshallah, we will have you again as per the situation and the
Inshallah.
question we need to ask. Thank
For
you for
sure.
joining. To our
Jazakallah.
viewers, it's been an awesome podcast. Hope you will enjoy it. If you have any question or complaint, please leave those down below. We will be glad to address those. Subscribe to us if you are watching it on Facebook. Follow us. Inshallah, we will meet again soon in the next podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.